Welcome to Outside the Box edition 320 for August 10th, 2014. I'm Ansary. This is part 2 of the Real Portlandia episode that I shot last night. I came into studio today to shoot a part 2 of that episode because there's a lot more that I intended to bring you in that 1-hour episode. But the conversation that we're having tonight cannot be put or forced into 58 minutes or 59 minutes. There's so much more to discuss in terms of this Real Portlandia, a town that I was born into in the year 1980, a town that I have a lot of experience in, a town where I was on the air for over 7 years, moved away for several years and came back earlier this year in 2014. So I've seen changes that people normally don't see when they stay in the same town, the same city, the same state, the same region, wherever you may be. And so it's important to see the changes taking place in our communities, in our cities, be they positive or be they negative, unconscious or conscious behavior coming from other humans, because that truly makes up the quality of the worlds, of the regions, of the locales that we live in. The other thing that I want to say before we get started is that you can live in Los Angeles, you can live in New York, you can live in London, you can live in Paris, you can live anywhere in the world. In fact, you can live in a small town and you can find information relevant to your own community. This is not about Portland, this is about the world. It's simply zoning in on a particular area and looking at what's being said about it in the mainstream press, but looking closer at what is the real reality, how people are living, the standards of living, mass migration, more growth coming to this region than what most people are prepared to deal with or are being told. Because let's look at the growth coming to this region. They're saying in the next several decades, an additional 400,000 residents will be calling the Portland area home. And this is going to drastically change the landscape. The other thing is many people are coming here from other places that are suffering from serious economic problems. Some of the cities have become bankrupt or are on the verge of bankruptcy. There's also a drought issue in the United States. You can type in 2014 drought map. Look at the country and look at where Portland is. When looking at these issues, mass migration, the big business involved, the private interests, who's really benefiting from the artificial growth that Portland is experiencing at this time, and who is suffering? And what are things more than likely going to be down the line as the private interests gain more and more control over policy at City Hall? It's important to note that the City of Portland has removed the part on their application that asks, have you been convicted of a felony? That has been removed, and one could only ask the question, why? When we see the shady ties between the City of Portland and HSBC. HSBC has already been caught, it's in Rolling Stone, laundering money for the drug cartels. Yet why does Portland, Oregon invest $8.3 million in this one corporation? That is one example of hundreds of examples, perhaps thousands, in terms of how the City of Portland actually does business. And what people need to know about this is, despite this artificial growth that's taking place, that's aided by advertising that the City of Portland pays for with taxpayer money, that's aided by the mainstream streams of influence, shows like Portlandia, magazines across the world, in fact, that are putting the focus on Portland. You need to ask who benefits from this, and also, how is this sustainable? How is this becoming closer to the earth? When we create habitats where, in fact, we're living with less in smaller spaces, next to people that we're actually not very close to. Real briefly, I want to say, when I was living off the grid in Colorado, even though I wasn't super close with all the residents there, I was invited into over 15 homes. It was kind of a novel thing to be out there in the middle of the desert. It takes a certain amount of focus and drive, passion, inner strength to handle it in some of those environments. And the area I was in was very close to Mesita, Colorado, or Manassas, Colorado, for those that would like to find it on a map. So there was something special about that. Yet in Portland, it sometimes is very difficult to have a true connection with your neighbor, with someone that's walking down the street that you don't know, because we're in a world where there is massive overstimulation. There's people all around. We talked in the last episode about bikers, walkers, pedestrians. In this massively expanding and growing metropolitan area, I see a unnatural effort to draw everyone together in the same space in a unnatural way that, in my opinion, isn't the most safe. It would be nice if we all shared the road, for example. Bikers, walkers, drivers, and perhaps other forms of transportation or commuting that I haven't mentioned. It works when everybody's on the same page. In Portland, not everyone is on the same page when it comes to sharing the road. And we're not just talking about drivers. We're talking about bikers. We're talking about walkers that walk out into the middle of the road. The real Portlandia is our focus tonight. And in the real Portlandia, things are not as they seem. So as we begin tonight, understand that we're talking about a region at a particular point in time that will continue to go through massive change. Do not take offense to anything that is being said tonight. You're far more than your first, middle, and last name. You're far higher than any label, the state you were born in, the planet you were born into. There's something more, I believe, about who we really are beyond our physical bodies. So it's important to understand where I'm coming from, which is a place of empathy and compassion for those that are suffering in this region and will later on at the hands of others, because the real Portlandia is a Portlandia where there's a certain unhealthy amount of apathy that still does exist to this day, and people are affected by it when they are hurt and no one speaks up for them, because there are others that are consumed with living life, the narcissistic life. For some people, the sociopathic life, where they are only out to improve their own immediate circumstances, to do things for themselves only. And this is what happens when the illusion of separation, when that fallacy becomes a truth in the mind of someone that is lost from the path of truth. And so people think, well, if I just do for myself and feed myself and build my own personal castle up, that's all based in the self, and that only brings fleeting moments of pleasure, of happiness, long-term spiritual satisfaction with one's life, and one's way of interpreting things and experiencing this reality. I do not think that just simply pleasures of the body is going to take you to a deeper connection with either yourself, others, or a greater understanding as to what you're doing here on the earth right now, including what you may be doing in Portland. So there's massive migration here. It's not just California. Quite a bit is coming from the East Coast. And we're going to see more migration here from all over the world. There are issues here that have not yet been fully addressed by either the people that live in this region, that like to keep their focus on the safe issues, things like the street taxes, while not actually looking at what's in the back of the page of the newspaper. And there's also a lot of people that have come here from elsewhere. They're just simply glad that they are no longer living in a bombed out wasteland. And I'm not here to bash them. I'm not here to blame them, because I'm speaking to some of you right now. I'm here to help you understand a truth that I understand myself and try to apply in my own life, because I've tried to run from the things that I don't like in the past. I left Portland, but I also came back to Portland. For me, it's about the journey of traveling, the different experiences that you have when you travel and you go from place to place and you see the different cultures, the different ways that women express themselves, the different ways in which men express themselves, the different types of architecture, the different types of food, the different types of culture, the different types of music, the different streams of thought. Travel can still, in this police state day and age, be a beautiful thing. Sometimes it's not always the most pleasurable. Sometimes it leaves you with a bad taste in your mouth, and you can't wait to go back to something familiar simply because it's familiar and not as alien. But when you travel for extended periods of time, you might also find that the energy frequency changes throughout this land of ours with so much history. You may feel certain energies in certain places. Some of them might be higher, some of them might be lower, depending on whether they make you feel good in your mind or they make you feel uncomfortable. And so these things are very, very interesting subjects to me. Child sex trafficking came up last week. Not an issue that we're going to talk about every single week, but an understood, misunderstood, widely unknown issue that this region is also plagued with. Along with rising costs of rent, utilities, major dependence on the service industrial complex, there is not enough quality local jobs that have been created for local native-born Portlanders. A lot of the jobs that have been created are tech jobs, and a lot of the people that have moved here in recent years have, in fact, in reality, been relocated here. There are some people that come here with nothing, and in the past that was easier to do. Come somewhere, stay on somebody's couch, stay on the streets for a few days, and find something. Most people, when they end up on the streets today, though, and they're stuck on the streets, it's not just limited today, it's been experienced for years and years, seen for years and years in the Portland area. There are certain degrees of mental illness and stress and pain that people go through when they have no family, or they feel that they are resented by the community for being a homeless person. Many men and women are suffering from mental illnesses that stem from how they're judged by society. Society at large doesn't seem to really understand this. And society itself uses the fact that they're homeless to pretty much assume that they have a mental health issue that cannot be helped with simple human love, affection, and compassion. Portland has a reputation of being very friendly to the homeless. This is because of the social services, Central City Concern, and some of the churches downtown that feed the homeless. But why is it all in downtown Portland? In the area around what used to be called the North End when they first created Portland, now Old Town, Chinatown, and elsewhere in that area. It's really a small area when you look at it. So we see how they've kept all of this stuff in the same zone, which is not energetically clean any way whatsoever. It is not a good place to go when you're suffering mentally or you're on the edge and you're trying to keep it together. In fact, there are more forces down there in the downtown area pulling people deeper into despair instead of lifting them up. It's a population issue. And when you see homeless all around you and you're homeless yourself, you see the numbers and you see how people, especially new Portlanders, treat homeless or pretend they don't exist or pretend that they wish that they came to a town without those problems or social ills. It weighs on the homeless man, the homeless woman. And a lot of women are preyed on, not only by men, but by some other women. And they suffer as well in a sexual sense. Doesn't mean that men don't, but men are in a different reality slightly in some circumstances. On the other hand, a good-looking woman, or a woman that's a man with money, or a woman with money, or a family with money, or someone else with something, or shelter, or security, may take in someone because they're perceived to be less threatening, simply because they don't have a penis, or because they have a ulterior agenda. So whether it's their own agenda to get a feminine body into their house. Just look on Craigslist today in the rent section. Want woman, want feminine, want woman, want feminine, no man, no man, no man. It's actually a consensus reality within the city of Portland to prefer women over men overall. In no way am I saying one is better than the other. I'm actually about equality. I believe in equality. I believe in fairness. I do not believe in discrimination, racial discrimination. I do not believe in gender discrimination. I do not believe in religious discrimination. So me highlighting these very serious issues that are taking place, factors that influence whether someone's hired for a job, factors that influence whether someone gets a home, factors that influence many other things. I am discussing what people are going through right now and what I myself am going through and have been going through and could be going through in the future, as long as the current conditions that I'm in continue. My email is right there if at any point you want to extend your hand in friendship. But that's not the point of this show. It's to give voice to those issues that have been buried under the carpet so people can get a deeper understanding of what the real Portlandia is morphing into. There is a lot of judgment in this city and racism that isn't talked about. And there is a certain amount of political awareness, within the box of Republican, Democrat. Beyond that, you have other fringe groups. There isn't a lot of cooperating amongst the activist groups in town, but on a racial level, for a lot of people, they don't know very much about people from other cultures and other lands. They know what they know from YouTube. They know what they know from television. They know what they know from video games, from movies, from things like that, from Facebook. For the most part, this is how most people, I'm not just, looking at Portland, understand the world as it is. And this is not a great way to make decisions. I understand NPR is very popular in towns like this. It's seen as liberal. It's seen as some sort of voice of the people. When I hear NPR, I hear something that sounds like it's straight from Nazi Germany. When they are constantly talking about people from other countries and talking about crimes that they are allegedly committing, it's basically cannon fodder for the military-industrial complex. Keeping people plugged into that state of consciousness to where they're afraid of people from other lands, they're afraid of terrorism, they're afraid of suicide bombings. And you got to understand, every 15 minutes, every 30 minutes, every so on in that break, they're coming back on to tell you, in Afghanistan today, another Afghan man did such, and such. Every single time without fail. When I listen to NPR, I'm hearing them go thousands of miles away to report one headline amongst thousands of other headlines that provides the justification of an occupation of foreign land, completely illegal and completely immoral. And so NPR, which gets massive amounts from corporations and other special interest groups, is not what people think it is. Even with its music that it has in between the shows that talks about some real life story about some Buddhist in Tibet making bread, boom, 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 boom. Now we're in Nepal, fresh air, and we're talking to this particular individual as he talks about trying to continue to make money, making bread for other peasants while dealing with the cost of inflation. We're NPR, and we actually care about people throughout the world. And so they report really interesting stories about things, cooking shows, and they also have shows, they have liberals, telling jokes, and basically laughing about things that actually aren't very funny. They had a show there, they were talking about, the CIA wanting to send Osama bin Laden dolls to Afghanistan to educate the Afghan boys, those stupid Afghan boys, so that they would turn away from terrorism, when in reality, Osama bin Laden was an asset of the US government. That's not a conspiracy theory. So as long as messages come out on networks like NPR and you don't see something wrong with it, it may be too late for you to actually see the larger truths that are out there. That may not be the case, but I know that it's pointless for me to continue to kick a dead horse, and it is a dead horse. NPR is what it is, but things like NPR, Amy Goodman does great reporting, but again, that backs up the official story of why we're in Afghanistan and Iraq, the reporting that's going on there, and not the backstory reporting as to the US government's involvement with fermenting Al-Qaeda, or even talking about Israel creating Hamas, if we want to talk about current events. As long as they keep those hot button topics out of the conversation, they're actually giving Bush, they're giving Obama, they're giving the next president cover to do what they're really doing, and that's help build a very dark, corrupted world government structure in which America is not necessarily going to profit from it. It's actually right in the crosshairs of the real control structure. And if you look closely at what's happening in America today, within our culture, within the manufactured gender divide, you can see those aspects of it in Portland, in the real Portlandia, a microcosmic expression of what is happening on a macrocosmic larger scale. So going on to one of our first points here, we talked about alcoholism is king here last week, also heroin addiction, and other lower vibrational expressions of humanity's desire to entertain itself or escape from pain. Portland, Oregon is a city, and this is something to think about very much so for those of you that think that this is a green city, a nature-friendly city, or a city that's friendly to nature, or a city that's friendly to the mankind, womankind that lives in the so-called natural city. Electromagnetic pollution is a big deal, and there's different things that cause it. Sometimes the sun causes it when the solar flares press down on our Earth's magnetic field, which we'll talk about in a future show, and we ourselves are affected by these changes when there's magnetic flux. But there's other unnatural changes. We're talking about the cell phone towers, we're talking about the smart meters, we're talking about other forms of radio waves, microwaves, things of that nature, other forms of technology. This is a city with a fair amount of military activity taking place, Navy activity taking place, a fair amount of surveillance on multiple levels from the local to also the international. When you're dealing with Homeland Security and those cameras in the bus mall, you need to understand that those cameras and other forms of technology can be viewed by other governments, especially if our government has made backdoor agreements or arrangements with other governments to view certain material surveillance cameras networks that collect information and data, because there's a lot of sharing of data and information going on between Russia, China, and the United States and other governments. Even though they act like they're about to go to war right now, any day now, which isn't going to happen, they're playing this out for another decade from now. You will see this manifest, and it's not going to happen tomorrow. So I would caution against taking cues again from the mainstream media and how they are portraying things on television today, wherever the information is coming from. So in terms of the electromagnetic pollution, it is said in order to affect the fish in the sea, you don't need to affect or target each fish, but instead affect the field of the sea itself. And that is what is being done with geoengineering. The rise of smart meters, cell phone towers, and other kinds of radiation in our urban environment, one that is already polluted in severe ways, especially Willamette and Columbia rivers, pollution that also affects the general area energy of the city. And I've felt for years that the real name of Portland is something more akin to the city of the wounded goddess, because there are beautiful primal earth energies here that I feel are oppressed in a way by these technologies. And when that happens, the people themselves are affected. And I believe that we are seeing the rise of mental illness in our society, in our culture, across the board. Not just affecting the homeless in some cases when they're isolated and they're stuck outside and they're breathing in this stuff all day long. A lot of them don't know about coconut oil pulling. Some of you haven't heard of it yet. It's a great way to detox chemicals and bacteria out of your system. Can't help you with everything, but there are certain things, certain measures when it comes to health and wellness that a person should consider when they're living in these environments, whether they're homeless or not. But for those that aren't homeless, that see themselves well adjusted to this out of balance society where we're truly divorced with nature, hurting each other, apathetic to the issues that are affecting our neighbors. That is a very toxic environment, and anyone well adjusted to this type of society is not very sane to me personally. And so that's also something that I want to mention. Just because someone's able to be okay with it and be okay with the slaughter of others and be okay with where Portland's really going and to be okay with just being in the moment, to me that's not a very positive sign. On the topic of this concept of using your beauty to manipulate others, not do good, but to use it. And this means whether you're a male, whether you're a female, whatever race you are, there's no labels necessarily in regards to this one. But there are some people that are born with beautiful bodies or strong bodies to where they can hurt people, break bones, break fingers, snap necks. And so there's a male, female version of this. The female version, really good looking, able to outcompete the other females and the other males, and basically thrive in a very unfriendly corporate environment. So there's a lot of people that use their bodies to basically say, hey, I'm a goddess. You should worship me. You should give me your watch. You should give me your car. You should give me your attention. And in fact, it's a form of energy vampirism. When you work to get other people's attention and glare at them if they look, or if you glare at them when they don't look at you on the street. I see a lot of that in Portland. To me, I interpret it as a form of energy vampirism. It's like, why do that? Why do that? Why engage in such unconscious behavior when you can do so much more with your body to maybe, I don't know, tell people to go to the light or do something good or respect nature itself? The whole concept of the goddess coming, from the old world Gnostic beliefs, pagan beliefs, deals with the earth spirit. Some call it Gaia, some call it Sophia. And we'll talk about Sophia in a future episode when we talk about the Gnostic texts and what they said about the archons, which were written about in the Nag Hammadi texts that were discovered in Nag Hammadi, Egypt in the year 1945. They were written around 400 AD. It's a very interesting story. That's the real story about the goddess. That is the root. It is not us ourselves worshiping ourselves because we're, in a place that brings out our beauty. Portland certainly brings out beauty in people. Externally, that is. Inside is something else. And in this inverted world, which is a microcosm for a macrocosm, we can see such evidence of such unconscious behavior. I want to go ahead and get into this. There's extreme levels of vanity in this city that I've never seen anywhere on earth in the degree that it is now. And in conjunction with everything that I just said, I want to read something that I wrote in the year 2012 while living in Dallas, Texas. So even though I was somewhere else, I was very much thinking about Portland when I wrote this. I often think of the life of a flower when I think of earth women and men. However, mortal men and women are more complicated since we humans have minds that at times deceive us. In this case, we're discussing physical beauty that is associated with the goddess, or for some men, ooh, I'm a god. Ooh, and there's a lot of, obsession with superheroes today, Iron Man, things like this. Take this flower, for example. It is beautiful because it was created that way, and it is just what it is. It's vibrating to the codes of nature programmed into it, as are earth women and men. Nature or intelligent design brought you your eyes, your breasts, your hair, your skin, your lips, your lovely voice that sings. Everything about your beauty was given to you by the Creator or the codes of nature. We did not create it, even if you have lipstick and you're able to pick out your own outfits. You yourself did not create the beauty that is vibrating throughout your body, even if you think it is that which you created yourself. Nor do we own the patents. It is not to be sold, cloned, taken, kidnapped, taken for granted, or used to control others or to elevate one above another human. Many have been gifted with the image of the goddess and beauty, but at times the ego mind is singing a different tune. Individual consciousness and the soul are but temporary visitors in the gorgeous organic body machine of life. The body is not you. It was given to you as a vehicle for your life experience. Thus, the body of the goddess should not be confused with the spirit of the goddess, which also transcends male and female anatomy. Our deeds and actions on this earth determine the real spirit within us. In time, the petals fade and the body becomes no longer. Many men face this reality as well as their physical beauty and strength fades over time. A wise man or woman sees the bigger picture in this life experience and is able to appreciate their beauty and the beauty of others, yet never worships it or takes for granted. All things come to pass, including our bodies. Spirit lives on. Humans, like this flower, are also given life by the sun. And the sun is one of my favorite topics. And in future episodes, I'm going to be delving into the solar influences on consciousness. A lot of different topics will be brought up, but we'll get into that later. In the real Portlandia, you find the boulevards of the world. Boulevards of the $50 Buddha. And I started thinking about this, using this phrase to describe Hawthorne, formerly known as Asylum Avenue, back in 2004. To describe the heavy effects of commercialism, of spiritual themes for profit, and of course, it could easily be called the Boulevard of the $100 Buddha or $200 Buddha if we were to adjust the price to meet rent inflation. Yet the primary message of the Buddha was to free ourselves from fleeting transitory desires, the very theme that runs through many of the shows that I bring to you here on PCM TV, if you choose to adjust your eyes to see it. Yet that message has been lost by this inverted reality. Instead, people buy trinkets, baubles, rocks, and other shiny things, large Buddha heads for their overpriced home. that never in a million years would they share with people that think differently than them or members of the opposite sex they see no value in unless there's a sexual relationship for them, or for some reason they're turned off by someone's looks, as if reality is about who turns you on and who turns you off, like there's some sort of a light switch. In a false reality where most humans are stuck operating in frock, flight, or fight. In the real Portlandia, you are judged by your looks and how you come across to others in their programming, demand, lust, fears, and so much more. It's not gender or racial specific, but we do see certain trends with certain groups that enjoy the social circles, boxes, labels, collective mannerisms, and identity. Groupthink is alive and well in Portland, and those truly operating outside the box live truly alone in a city that punishes the contrarian until they learn their lesson and join the club and just be themselves, the version of themselves that is approved for mass consumption. In the real Portlandia, competition, consumption, and tribalism are the primary religions of this region, not community. Consuming food, drink, bread and circus, violent video games, lap dances, video poker, mindless sports featuring grown men chasing big balls with other men fawning over them at home, rooting for something entirely meaningless, and few other healthy activities seem to entertain them. If you criticize this insanity, they will throw you out with the wolves as well. Again, in the real Portlandia, you say something unpopular, he will throw you out to the wolves. They'll throw you out to the wolves for saying that they will throw you out to the wolves for saying something unpopular. And they're like, oh, but we have perfect justification to do so. When in reality, revalidating the very same message that some consider offensive. All I'm doing is speaking the truth. In the real Portlandia, some men don't actually look brave at all. They look weak and look like they themselves are in a continuous empty rat race with their own senses to entertain themselves in a new way and to conform to what women demand, which is either, this is what I've seen here, but it's not limited to here, either a overly dominant man that makes the commands or an overly feminized man that lives his life to please someone else. It's true. Like men elsewhere in the world, the lust contained within him that wishes to procreate on a primal level, not conscious. They may want to have sex but not have a baby, but that's driven by something more primal, the act of wanting to have sex. It can drive a man to lose himself, to chase women that he shouldn't chase. And his identity in order to please an increasingly anxious, resentful, tribalistic-leaning female population that it itself is affected by the trauma of this world and region. And I feel exactly what a lot of those women feel, even though they think that there is no connection between us. There is no oneness. It's man versus woman. It's black versus white. It's Portlander versus those that aren't Portlanders. There's so much more that actually connects us. And you can have empathy for the male situation, and I can have empathy for the female situation. You can have both male and female aspects to yourself and it not be about heterosexuality or homosexuality. You can have empathy and feel for others, as do I. As far as I can see, this town is wide open to all kinds of things as people continue to show strong aversion to what is happening to others. The apathy they show, lack of compassion, to the pain and suffering others are going through right now in the Portland area. And there's a lot of people that end up this way because they themselves have been hurt. They themselves have been taken advantage of. They themselves have had complications in their life. They themselves feel that because they had to borrow so many thousands of dollars to go to school, but maybe they were in a situation where they were of privilege and able to either get help from parents or they were intelligent enough in that special field. But not everyone's going to be intelligent enough at a special field to go into a certain doorway. But that mentality exists. That mentality does exist. If someone else says, hey, well, I was able to do it, why can't you? The world really doesn't work like that. I know a lot of people are really like attached, like chains, to these world views. The world is very little like the world that you may think that it is. There can only be so many people working at your hospital. Okay. There can only be so many police. There can only be so many firefighters. There can only be so many people at city council. There can be only so many people that are awarded those grants by the city. And there's so much more that goes on into how some of these decisions are actually being made. Now, there are also men in this city that try to act and look tough, that aren't hipsters, that proudly display their tap-out shirt or some other shirt that is highlighting some form of human aggression. For a while, it was no fear. There's certainly a lot of fearful people in this society that aren't saying anything about what's going on. Don't give me that no fear crap. And it sure looks like there's a whole lot of men that have been tapped out themselves. So there's this front, and in the future, I plan to expand on this concept. Okay, in Portlandia, like many other places, it is the land of the paper tough guy. Okay, of the paper tiger, standing with some sort of a bastardized fighting stance. In some cases, leaving their elbows open. Oh, you look at those, boxing pictures from, the old days. That's not actually how you actually want to fight. You want to protect yourself. Even when you see people posing, they don't even look like they're the best at what they're actually doing. It's more about, when people watch the MMA and they watch some of these things, and I'm not talking about people that train in the gym. I'm talking about what's on TV, okay? I'm specifically talking about the UFC and some of the other human cockfighting events that are taking place on a regular on a regular basis all throughout this country. And it distorts, and it pulls people in. It plays on that aggressive energy. There's nothing about at what point can all the tough men come together that actually care about this country, okay? And right now, it's just, oh, you go in the military and you fight for the bankers. Oh, you fight for the corporations. You oppress men and women from other countries, but you get told you're a hero. And you come back and there's parades, there's wives, there's husbands, they're holding you up. You're seen as the protector. You're seen as someone helping this country. It's inversion. It's a false reality. Up is down, down is up. War is peace, peace is war. And if you criticize what's happening in D.C., some people that don't address real racism will call you a racist. Oh, all of a sudden they're calling out racism. And they're calling out people or accusing people that actually don't want to see people droned to death, that don't want to see people put into camps, that don't want to see these things take place. They're called the racist. All hallmarks of a perverted, inverted reality that I'm trying to help you see and understand, that this whole dimension of reality is very different than the one that you assume that it is. The enlightened, conscious, we're just ready to get raptured reality. So these men wearing these tap-out shirts and other shirts, it's true that the paradigm of the counterfeit tough guy, paper tiger, can be found all over the city's neighborhoods and bars. It's as Portland as the Rose Festival, but how many men go out there taking a risk covering what needs to be covered, or appreciated for doing so? In this land of inversion, what is my strength to you is my weakness. And that's my compassion for others, still suffering at the hands of an apathetic population that's okay with the extreme levels of victimization afoot right now. Now, going into our next point, making sure we're going to have time to get into all this, which we will. In the real Portlandia, people pretend to be unconscious of certain realities. They act like they don't know you when you look back at their stares. However, if I so much as look at someone naturally as I pass them, as a natural practice of awareness of my environment in conjunction with my peripheral vision, people will snap their head back with a glare or an anxious-ridden look in microseconds, sometimes turning and looking at me abruptly like I'm shocking them as I actually look. So in psychic real time, which is almost unheard of. So I can look in this way. I can glance like that or like that, as I'm walking down the park. And that's enough to cause someone that's walking the other direction to go. Now, I don't know what it is that actually does shoot out of my eyes on an energy level. Our eyes do send and transmit information, but I do think that there's something unique about just the way we exchange eye contact in this world and in this city. And long ago, when I was young, I came to a conclusion about Portland. There's something about this place that heightens our psychic sensitivity, whether this is something that you believe in or not. Some call it the third eye, some relate it to the sixth chakra. But that idea of being somewhat intuitive to where, we're a sea of energy, bouncing thoughts and looking at each other, it's bouncing back. There's something real to this. So in Portland, people pretend to be unconscious to certain realities, but they certainly seem to be very aware if someone, or at least myself, looks at them with just a microsecond, and it's very strange to see them snap back when I myself am looked at constantly, and yet I just try to keep to myself, look down at the ground, and not return the stare or gaze, unless it's feeling super unfriendly, in which case I do return the stare. Although I try not to feed into certain negative energies that are out there. And there's a lot of that as well. There are people that will stare without even knowing you, and it's not just, this isn't just about me. I share personal experiences. I see what other women go through. I see how other men treat them. It's a very scary world, actually, that some women live in, especially if they're on the streets, if they're good looking. There are sex predators all around them, watching them, wanting to do something to them. Now, there is something about protection and being a spiritual being and shielding yourself with however you want to describe that shielding process, okay, with whatever language you're accustomed to using. But I do believe there's something about people that walk through this life, that walk through violent lands and violent places, men and women, women and men, and absolutely nothing comes to them at all that hurts them, that maims them. There's something special about these individuals. I've known many people in my life that were never assaulted in their life, never punched, never slapped, never raped, never hurt. They may have lost their jobs, they may have had to move, they may have had trouble in relationships, but there are people out there that are survivors. There are cases of good people that may not be living a life of paradise, but their health is okay to a certain degree. At one point, we're going to leave these bodies and we won't be here. And all this may not even be a memory. It all may just go back up into the whatever again until and whatever happens next in terms of how things really operate, in terms of where our soul goes in the spiritual biological matrix. But we'll save that for another show. But there is something about people and the glow that they have, and people that I have really admired in this town and other places in this country, that are able to walk and live in this reality and live without fear. Some of them speak up, out against the crimes taking place to other people, but some of them help indirectly. They don't go out there and put their own face out there, but they may support people behind the scenes because they're genuinely good people and they're not under full-blown mind control to the point where they're going to turn on someone just because they have a different point of view, or because they're not a Republican, or because they're not a Democrat. And so I salute those people out there that have been my friends, that have shown that, you know, they have a soul that isn't so oppressed that it's not able to see some things as they actually are. Another Buddhist concept that is lost in the boulevard of the 50, now 100, now $200 Buddha. In the real Portlandia, I respect people's space, and I do not engage in unwanted staring, especially at women. It's not something I engage in. I consider it rude and aggressive. There's also another reason for that. I don't believe in chasing tail just because of its physical appearance. If someone sees any value in me, they'll contact me and say they like the show. This contact people off the internet, off the street stuff, you know, it's interesting for some people in this wild biological matrix. It's no longer anything I want anything to do with. It's not in well when you're dealing with mass consciousness, people taking antidepressants, drugs from the government, alcohol, cigarettes, other drugs, other problems, other mind control issues, other abuse issues they went through as a young person or going through right now from the energy that we live in these cities and in this world. It all affects us. It's trauma-based mind control. It's a light form of PTSD. And when you're dealing with the average person out there, it's very difficult to cut through all that stuff and deal with the heart connection. Lust is the first thing that comes up as far as, you know, the interaction, as far as the friendship, the connection, talking about the real things that matter without someone saying, you're not entertaining me, you're boring me. It is, at least in my life, and the lives of many others, almost non-existent in the Portland area at this time. There's so much focus on entertainment, music, socializing, cackling. Some call it laughing. It seems more like cackling now at this point, and so many other fleeting moments of pleasure that have nothing to do with Buddhist or Eastern concepts. What I have learned from interacting with the people of Portland is that there is caution in interacting too much with a town that loves the rock star or celebrity, both things of which I am not. But to those watching TV, it might seem that I'm trying to be something that I'm not. Some will see me as either not in a favorable way or a negative way, mostly negative. with a few that claim to appreciate the show. They say they appreciate the show. Here I am about 10 years later since starting the show. There's literally no contact coming from the audience. It's just, good luck, kid. Good luck to you. Appreciate the show. What are you going to talk about next? I just want to feed. And it's energy vampirism. And it takes place when you sit there, you watch, you tap in, and you pull energy, and you don't do anything to give back. That's energy vampirism. And many television viewers are taking part in that act, especially when you're sending anger at me and judgment, you know, and thinking all this stuff. You just need to make contact, not just sit there behind a screen. It's true I put myself out there because there's not a lot of this content being put out there, period. And I feel that the people of Portland could use some of this information. And I feel that if there's things that were said in these last 2 episodes that bother you now, I would advise going back and watching these shows in a couple of years. Okay, maybe 10 years, maybe 15 years. Go back and watch these shows then tell me I'm a hateful person, then tell me I'm crazy, then tell me it's all in my head. Can you remember to do that in a couple of years and then compare what, you know? I hope so. And so, in a town where they love a rock star, if you're homeless and you need certain things, unless it's a difficult place to be. In a town where they like the rock star who's on top, successful, who's got the big audience, and who's on the air. And it's very enlightening to the state of consciousness in this general area. Okay, there's a few more things that I want to get into and close. In the real Portlandia, the desire to be fed, entertained, to cackle loudly in the night with your drunken driving, to cut someone off, to take someone's job, to compete for things you shouldn't have to, without speaking against the control system, to drug, rape, rob, or look the other way when others are hurt, to leave people in the streets that care about our future's community, people that are willing to take risks and suffer the homeless experience. That is a special kind of human. The kind of human that's living a life, praising itself every second while cursing others as evil, others as unconscious, others as not good enough at manifesting things with their magic, their magi, yet maintain that tight blind spot on the nature of evil that is occupying our planet, city, and trying to deceive us. In the real Portlandia, there's not a very good understanding of karma or cause and effect. Okay, let's talk about Afghan women, let's talk about Palestinian women, let's talk about Iraqi women, let's talk about the things that are going on in regions like Yemen, Libya, Africa. What's your response in particular to stories about troops raping women and lack of accountability with our own government, the Pentagon destroying rape kits of even women being raped within our own military? Okay, there are people that will say, well, they drew it to them. It was their karma, or they'll say that was their karma with other language without saying the K word. They will say, well, that's how those people live. Well, that's what they have coming to them after, doing all these things to each other and around the world and all these things. They blame the victim. Many of these people in these regions are victims of dictatorships that were put into power a very long time ago and financed with Western money. You keep being told it's separate from the United States government and that it's this rogue thing out there where there's no special financing going on. It's a fallacy, it's a fairy tale, it's disinformation. But it doesn't matter. People will still go, oh, but that was, they brought it on themselves for being Muslim, wearing that burqa. That whole outlook doesn't apply to themselves. What happens when the lights really do go out in Portland and there's a stage-managed event and public safety plummets and there is no 911 and there is no police to protect you and things start happening? Are we going to then go, well, maybe this is in response to all the stuff that's been done all these years? Is God involved? Is the devil involved? Is this just staged by the New World Order, which is devilish in its own way? Where is the reality in all this? You can only mind frock this so far. Ultimately, what goes around comes around. And so this country has certain challenges coming to it because of the things that it's done. People have a hard time seeing that, but they're real quick to demonize people from other countries and look the other way when they're violently hurt. And so what I'm saying is, this is not a balanced way of looking at these situations, okay? It's a contradiction. And so there's people that say they're spiritual and new agey, and they're basically saying unless you're able to manifest your way out of all these things, you brought it on yourself by even being aware of it. And in a future show, we need to expand on the New Age deceptions, not to be confused with genuine spirituality, which has been here since the dawn of time, which is timeless, but the New Age distortion of the spiritual teachings, that instead of taking people to a more empathetic place for all of mankind, having love for all living creatures, it's actually in fact covertly going the other way, into self-worship, into apathy, into all different types of lust without love and greed, and being willing to live your life as a hamster in this hamster wheel reality that is the real Portlandia. Portland's future is more certain today than it was several years ago. There is no stop to this runaway growth, demolishing older homes to make way for Agenda 21 style micro apartments, the drones over your home, the helicopter flying over, the federal money flowing in to corrupt the town further, expanding the military's activity. There's also ample evidence that this new global city appears to be a major base now for Google, other tech companies. There's also at one point going to be an iCloud system that'll have the futuristic cars talking to each other. That's going to bring all types of new signals to the city. There was a major conference in Portland just 2 weeks ago where people came from all over the world to talk about this very subject, including many from Germany. This new global city attracting also Wall Street banks, military industrial complex manufacturing sites that make drones. There's many along the Columbia River into the Columbia Gorge, lasers and other forms of technology that murder innocent people. All the while, all this money is flowing in. The city is actually, in reality, further into debt than what most people realize, and there is more money missing or that has been taken, that has been reported by the Oregonian, and they've covered a lot of very important revelations about our city, along with Portland Mercury, along with Willamette Week, along with the Portland Tribune, along with many other publications. They have very important pieces of information. They all fall on their face when it comes to connecting the dots, because no one wants to sound controversial. There's actually an agenda behind this to bankrupt our city and hand it over to the private interests. With little doubt, this runaway spending, like our nation, is going to end up in this direction, and we will see more criminals at that point as well in our region. We're already seeing a rise in Zeta activity. In the real Portlandia, we are seeing and will continue to see mankind, womankind merging more and more with technology. The sociological phase known as transhumanism is taking place within our world, and the influence of cell phones, social media, and other forms of digital technology and entertainment has in many cases completely taken people away from nature, spirituality themselves, others, or a clear understanding of how things operate in the universe. Simple things like cause and effect, or why they are here in Portland on a life lesson level, destiny to do something great, or anything else other than feed the senses, like a hot dog or a vegan tempeh eating contest, where only those with the means can dine, drink, and stroke their senses and their cares away. Just like old Portland, how vintage of us as a city. A throwback to the old world. An old world that a lot of people don't know a whole lot about. The truth is that spirituality does not come about through body orgasms of pleasure or the senses being fully activated through external experiences, including being in a somewhat green appearing city with the abundance of replanted trees. What about the original trees? Lining their over-the-top priced homes and frighteningly wealthier and wealthier neighborhoods involving very few people of color. What is really happening is massive white flight from bankrupted areas, dangerous areas, overpopulated areas, areas where their jobs have been eliminated or transferred here. You can look at it this way. You can look at it this way. If you don't drink water for several days and you feel close to dying, if you get that first glass of water, it might feel like heaven. Or the first time you eat in weeks, or the first time you sleep in days, or the first time you make love to someone in years, or are being made love to, or the first time you intoxicate yourself with something that alters your mind, body, and spirit. Some things might seem to help while they actually do the reverse. What's important to understand here is that physical pleasure alone is not a spiritual experience, especially when one lives their little lives in a selfish way in order to get a bigger home, a bigger fence, newer car, more attractive, dominating, or submissive mate, It usually balances to one or the other. There's very few, there are many of you that are living happy marriages and lives. When it comes to entry-level relationships though, and we're not that level because of the programming that people have in the society, it's either leaning to one end of the polarity for each individual or each partner in the relationship. And so all these things are taking place, and it's not indicative of a true spiritual experience. Yes, it surely is a day of new seasons in the real Portlandia, with a whole food obsession and love for the spices of this world, but not so much for the people from those lands, a scene also very reminiscent of the old Portland and old world. There's also a drought map of the United States I mentioned earlier that does not paint the landscape of the current America in a fine light. And then there's the UN's doctored map of what the world will look like, in their opinion, in a few decades, with only a few safe places to migrate to, one of them being the Oregon area, in particular Portland. With all these issues and more, there will be no slowdown to both the growth, crime rate, privatization of local resources and more, airborne pollution, electromagnetic pollution, not to mention psychic pollution from an anxiety-ridden society that appears almost completely unable to see the city as it actually is. In the real Portlandia, if you want to take anything away from this presentation, you will disassociate yourself from all labels, groups, and especially from thinking that all Portlanders are the same. If you think such, treat me with kindness, the same that you send others. It's not okay to judge me and ignore me when all I've done is help you, while at the same time attacking me for speaking up about local issues that are wrong and how great the imbalance is today between men and women, women and men, all these different perceptions of races and classes, living out an unconscious war of the people that comes from our lower selves that is firmly tied to the illusions of separation. And as I said at the conclusion of last show, as we conclude tonight, real solutions are available but are unpopular and have nothing to do with violating others' free will or making someone bend to our way of doing things or thinking. You have the power yourself individually to care about all living creatures, all living beings, as well as the earth. You have the power to speak for future generations of women and men, men and women. Be you a man or a woman. You yourself have the power to go beyond all labels, especially labeling yourself in any way, shape, or form. You yourself have the ability to override any perceptions that you have no power and that your voice is insignificant. The world needs people to speak their truth, even if it's unpopular, even if people don't agree, because doing so, speaking against great unconscious behavior on our planet, is likely a destiny that many of you have yet to realize. I will not be convinced that your only purpose is to drink, dance, devour, twerk, butt slap, dope, gentrify new land while burning the land behind you, and so many other things. You have great power within you. And there are energies that you can tap into on this planet, in this region, powerful energies, in order to assist you along your way in breaking completely outside the box of all different types of control by your own hand, programming by your own hand, and by others. Punishment to the body by society may be great. I'm a living testimony to that. But the rewards to your soul and your soul's journey in this spiritual biological matrix is great. And we are going to be discussing subjects like that very, very soon. Next week, we're going to be covering a whole new topic that does not specifically involve Portland directly. So for those that have watched a show with rage, anger, scoffery, or open-jawed, what the frock is this trash? For those of you looking at space through a McDonald's straw that you found on the street, don't worry. Next week is going to be an entirely different show. That's one thing about Outside the Box TV, even if you resent me, that there is something in this show for everyone. Thank you for watching Outside the Box number 320 for August 10th, 2014. I'm Alex Ansary, and we'll speak with you next week. Thanks for watching.